What if I told you that in just one session McLaren has destroyed Mercedes' total dominance in 2026? And it has done so in such a forceful way that right now the entire paddock is in shock? Because what Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri just did in the Miami Sprint Qualifier is not normal. It is not a surprise, it is the beginning of something much bigger. The impact of what happened in the Miami 2026 Sprint Classification cannot be understood without first analyzing the context in which McLaren arrives at this weekend. Because until this moment the season had a completely different script. Mercedes had imposed absolute dominance in qualifying, setting the pace on each circuit, controlling the narrative and making it clear that under the new 2026 regulations, they were the team to beat. McLaren, despite its obvious growth since previous seasons, was still seen as a chaser, a competitive team but still a step behind when it came to squeezing out a perfect lap. And that is why what happens in Miami is not a simple improvement. It is a total break with that reality. From the first moment the cars hit the track in this sprint classification, something started to feel different. It was not an obvious change at first, but it was a progressive feeling that McLaren was playing by different rules. When Lando Norris sets the pace from the early stages, not only leading, but showing unusual stability and confidence in the car, doubts begin to arise in the rest of the teams. And that doubt grows when it is not an isolated lap, when the performance is maintained, when the car responds in each attempt and in each track condition. That's where the paddock begins to understand that this is no coincidence. The key moment comes when Norris completes that lap of 1 minute and 27.869 seconds, a lap that not only gives him pole position, but directly breaks Mercedes' streak in qualifying throughout the season. It's not just the time, it's how he achieves it, without visible errors, with a car perfectly planted in each sector, with an execution that conveys absolute mastery. But what is truly compelling is not the pole itself, but what happens right behind it. Because Oscar Piastri appears in third position, closing a 1-3 for McLaren that eliminates any possible doubt. This is not an inspired driver. It is a car that has completely changed its competitive level. And this is where the analysis becomes even deeper, because the difference between Norris and Piastri is just 0.239 seconds, with a Mercedes in between. This data, which may seem small, is actually huge in Formula One terms, because it shows that both drivers can extract practically the same performance from the car. There is no dependence on a specific driving style, there is no irregularity, there is consistency. And in this sport, when a car is consistent in the hands of two drivers, it means that the performance is real, replicable, and most dangerously sustainable. Meanwhile, the rest of the grid begins to fall behind at a key moment. Ferrari remains close, Red Bull appears further behind than expected, and Mercedes, although competitive, loses that absolute control it had shown until now. It is a change subtle in appearance but enormous in meaning, because in modern Formula One hierarchies are not usually broken suddenly, except when a team introduces something that completely changes the technical balance. And that's exactly what McLaren has done. This performance does not come from nowhere, it is the direct consequence of an aggressive development philosophy that the team had already been applying since previous seasons. From that turning point where they began to transform their car into a winning machine, until now, where they have directly decided to reinvent their concept to adapt to the 2026 regulation. What we see in Miami is the result of that process taken to the extreme, a car that no longer seeks to compete, seeks to dominate. The key is that McLaren has not optimized its car, it has redefined it. The improvements introduced affect practically all the critical areas of the car, which indicates that they have found a global solution to the problems they were experiencing. And when a team manages to align aerodynamics, mechanical behavior, and tire management in a single direction, the jump in performance is not gradual, it is immediate. That explains why the change feels so abrupt, so unexpected, and so shocking. That's why the paddock is shocked. Because what seemed like a season controlled by Mercedes now has a new protagonist. Because what seemed like a fight to be the second best team now becomes a direct fight for leadership. And above all, because when a team finds this level of performance in an early phase of the regulations, history tells us that it may not be something specific. It may be the beginning of a new era. The true turning point of everything we are seeing in Miami 2026 is not only in the times, not even in Lando Norris' pole position or in 1-3 with Oscar Piastri. It is in what is behind that performance. Because when you analyze in depth what McLaren has done, you realize that they have not found a few tenths. They have completely changed the rules of the game on a technical level. To understand this, you have to go directly to the heart of the problem that McLaren was having and that, apparently, they have solved suddenly. The MCL 40, in its initial concept, was not at the level expected under the new 2026 regulations. There were clear limitations in how the car interacted with the tires, especially in qualifying where the performance window was too narrow. This made the car unpredictable at the key moment, just when you need to extract the maximum in a single lap. And in Formula One, that type of weakness is lethal because it condemns you to always starting from behind. What McLaren has done in Miami is attack that problem at its roots, not with minor adjustments, but with an almost total reconstruction of the car. We are talking about changes that affect critical areas such as the floor, bodywork, brake ducts, and rear wing. This is not a conventional evolution. It is a redefinition of the aerodynamic behavior of the car. And when you modify those areas at the same time, what you are really doing is changing how the car generates load, how it maintains it in different phases of the corner, and, above all, how it treats the tires at the most demanding moment. This is where everything starts to fit with what we saw on the track. That dominance of Norris since SQ1, that consistency in each attempt, that ability of Piastri to be practically at the same level, is no coincidence. It is the direct consequence of a car that now has a much wider operating window. And this is key because it means that the drivers can push without fear, without having to fight against the car, without that margin of error that previously penalized them. But there is an even more important detail, and that is that this type of improvement not only affects the classification, it completely changes the potential of the car throughout the weekend. When a car is more stable, more predictable, and more consistent, it is not only faster on a lap, it also manages the tires better in the long run, allows for more aggressive strategies, and reduces degradation. That is, what we are seeing in sprint qualifying could be just the tip of the iceberg of a much bigger leap. And this is what really puts Mercedes and the rest of the teams on alert. Because until now they could interpret McLaren's performance as something specific, dependent on certain conditions or perfect execution. But what has been seen in Miami completely breaks that idea. This level of performance is structural, born from the car, and that makes it a real and sustained threat. Furthermore, we must understand the moment in which this change arrives. We are relatively early in the 2026 regulatory cycle, which means there is still room for development. If McLaren has already found this right direction, it has a huge advantage because not only has it taken a leap now, it has a much more solid base on which to continue evolving the car for the rest of the season. And here appears one of the most uncomfortable questions for their rivals. Can they react in time? Because when one team changes the concept of their car and gets it right, the others can't just copy it right away. It requires time, resources, and, above all, understanding exactly what that car is doing differently. And in modern Formula One, where every detail counts and every thousandth is critical, that delay can be decisive. That is why what McLaren has done in Miami is not just an improvement, it is a strategic coup. They have gone from trying to close the gap to creating a new reference. And when one team achieves that, it forces everyone else to rethink their path. Right now, the big question is no longer whether McLaren can compete with Mercedes, it's whether Mercedes can adapt quickly enough to stop what could become the beginning of a new era of dominance. And now we come to the most important consequence of everything that has happened in Miami, because what McLaren has caused in this sprint classification does not remain a simple surprise, but rather opens a completely new scenario for the sprint, the race, and, above all, for the championship. The first thing that changes is the immediate perspective of the weekend. With Lando Norris starting from pole and Oscar Piastri within the top 3 positions, McLaren not only has speed, it has strategic control. In a sprint format where everything is shorter, more aggressive, and with less room for reaction, getting ahead is practically half a victory. And this is where this result becomes even more dangerous for their rivals because we are not talking about defending positions, we are talking about imposing the pace from the beginning. If the car has already proven to be the fastest on one lap, the big unknown turns directly to the race pace. But there is one sign that cannot be ignored. When a car has a wider operating window, as seems to be the case with the updated MCL 40, it tends to perform better on long runs. This means less degradation, greater consistency, and the ability to better manage key moments of the race. In other words, McLaren can't just lead, it can control, and this is where the pressure completely changes sides. Throughout the 2026 season, Mercedes had been the team that forced others to react, the one that set the pace, the one that played with the advantage. But in Miami, for the first time, that pressure falls on them. They no longer have pole position, they no longer have absolute control, and most importantly, they no longer have the certainty of being the fastest car. That, in Formula One, is a huge psychological change. Because when you lose that reference, doubts begin to appear. Doubts in the strategy, doubts in the configuration, doubts in the execution. And meanwhile, McLaren is in the opposite position. Complete confidence, Two drivers performing at the highest level and a car that responds exactly as they need. That combination is what turns a good session into a possible championship turning point. The big question now is how their rivals will respond. Because it is no longer enough to improve a few tenths, now they need to understand a concept that seems to have taken a complete leap. And that takes time, development, and decisions that are not always easy to make in the middle of a championship. Meanwhile, McLaren is already in another position, that of leading the way. Now everything is at stake. The sprint, the race, the championship, but above all, control of the immediate future of this 2026 season. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.